blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is the solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Self-Love Show. I'm your host, Dawn Light, and this is my gorgeous co-host. Wait, this way? Trish Wright. This way. And today is an exceptionally special day. We're so honored to be here. Oh, my internet is a little wonky. Sorry. We are discussing a really amazing thing, and it's about unblocking the light of intimacy. So Trish is going to share with us a really gorgeous tool today, and it's how to get out of the PEA Brain and live into your heart, which is really awesome. So to explain it a little further, the PEA Brain are projections, expectations, and assumptions. Can really wreak havoc on your life and your most intimate relationships. So from this place, we live in anxiety, fear, competition, and not enoughness, which will suffocate your authentic expression, aliveness, and ability to connect. So together, we will courageously learn to look at our core beliefs, lovingly examine them, and acknowledge how they create our projections. And from there, we can step from our assumptions and expectations into humility and trust to cultivate the relationships we long for. So without further ado, I just want to say thank you, Trish, for all your amazing hard work in the back end of this show and how you show up weekly, and you're incredible. I'm so honored to coach with you and be your sister on this journey, and thank you for all you do and who you are. I just want to acknowledge you right now.
Oh, thanks, Dawn. Yeah, so I don't know about anybody else, but and maybe from a show of comments, is anyone else going through massive anxiety right now? Or is it just me? Okay, great. Now that I know I'm alone, I'm kidding. That I've been really thinking about how to manage anxiety and how to, manage the feelings of being pushed and like, does anyone else feel this way? Maybe you can relate, Dawn, because I know that we've had some conversations about this. Is like, sometimes I take on these really exciting projects, like things that I'm like, I'm a full-on fuck yes to, and I'm like there. And what I don't get is that I can't fathom the realm of what other things might, like the things that I might not know, like what steps we'll need to take. And then I feel like this big train is pushing behind me, and I'm like, wait, slow down, So do you feel like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have it's like I've called in these amazing things. Like I called in, clients, I called in like a giant project I've been working on. And then it's like all of a sudden my time availability is shortened, right? So there it is, the pressure where I want to apply that pressure of like, am I going to get it all accomplished, and have self-care time, family time, like how do I spin all the plates and balance it all, right? So that's like how it shows up for me. But I really find that leaning into giving myself the self-care and trusting that I will get it all done, and that, prioritizing and really giving myself the spaciousness to like let go and not feel like I have to pile it all on my plate all in one day.
Yes.
It really helps me manage it personally. Because in the past, I would have chosen to let go of things that would have been a self-care moment, right? Like the extra step in my facial care routine at night, or not giving myself enough actual workout morning, right? Like I would cut it short to go tend to all the other tasks, and ultimately that was not self-honoring, right? And so it's little ways we let go of our self-honoring choices where we choose to allow our anxiety to kind of get the better of us, I think. So it's like just leaning back and taking deep breaths in that place and realizing what's the most self-honoring choice I can make so that I can really prioritize and lean into what's the top priority of the day.
I exactly. I'm constantly reminding myself, like, okay, what is the most self-honoring choice that I can make now? And I've showed, like, for all of you who don't know, right, Dawn knows, is that my front page of my computer is a quote, my quote, like, what is the most self-honoring choice that I can make right now? And it's for these moments of like, okay, I feel like I have all of this pushing me forward. And what can I do to honor myself? Because if I'm going to be on the self-love show, and if I'm going to revolve my whole life around coaching and intimacy and connection, like, I have to walk the talk. I have to be in the self-honoring choice. That's the work. And, there's been some comments about self-honoring being selfish, and it's not about letting go of all responsibility, right? It's not about, like, if you have children or if you have pets or, loverships, it's not about like, well, F them. Like, it's like, I'm not going to serve them anymore. It's not about that, because we can also get real about a place there of like, hey, I want to be of service. Most people I know want to be of service in their lives, in their relationships, in the things that they do. But there's an energy of empowerment, and the way that the energy moves when you move from inspiration instead of expectation or obligation. So that's the thing, is like, when you're moving from out of obligation is when it gets crunchy, when it feels like it's, oh no. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's things that we're just going to have to do. I'm going to have to pick up, if I have a dog, I'm going to have to pick up dog poop. Like, I have to move out of expectation there. That just is the thing. But it is moving from a place that feels alive and in my heart, right? Anyway, a little tangent. Oh.
Jody Ann is saying, I'm experiencing a little too, but then I position myself as the observer instead of the experiencer, and that helps. That's really beautiful. Thank you, Jody Ann. Hi.
Hi,
Yeah.
Paul. So let's talking about PEA Brain. So what I really wanted to talk about today, I didn't mean to interrupt, John. Go ahead. There's a lag between us.
It happens. No, it's good. We're just having a great conversation, and this is it. So
yeah. So what I've been noticing in my life is that I've taken on a grip of really amazing projects, and I'm excited about them. I'm sitting with where my fuck yes lives. If you don't know about the fuck yes, because like I know we've shared about this in the show, and I know not everyone catches every show, so let's just talk about that for a second. Living in your fuck yes means that it's your full-hearted yes, 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 I am there. You can feel it in your body. It feels right. You're leaning in. It feels alive, right? Mm-hmm. And anything else other than that is generally a no, right? If even if it's a maybe, it's a no in the moment. So when you make self-honoring choices, that right there is living in your fuck yes. It's living in your full, authentic truth. And if it's a maybe, then it's not a for sure. It's not a I'm positive. And that's where we get into, messy issues, right? It's generally where a lot of us can say no. And if you can't, call me up. Let's have conversations about how to say no. Call Dawn up. Let's have conversations about how to say no. But usually, like, when our boundary is clear, we can say no. Like, actually, I don't want to do that. That's not really aligned with me at all. I've changed my mind. It's a no. But when we say maybe, or when we're confused, is a place where we can get into big trouble. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So the place of maybe, and that energy of maybe, is a place where I've abandoned myself. I don't even know, like hundreds of times, maybe even thousands. I'm, in my 30s now. I'm sure that I've done that so many times that I can't even count. So it's that place right there where it's like, okay, actually, the most self-honoring choice I can make in my confusion is to say no, not right now. I don't know, and to sit with it. and to get clear in my body. What is the intelligence of my body saying? You know? So that's what a fuck yes is. So when I use that term, that's what I mean. Just, you know, just to make sure that everyone can follow along and is there. So
it's truly honoring when you really lean into if it's not a yes and you're a maybe and you're confused, or if the clarity hasn't hit yet because it just can't visualize it or see it, you take opportunity, but you need to sit with it. You can really lean in and say that to the person that you're speaking with. They say, this feels so good and I'm not fully clear. So let me get back with you about that. Like, give me some time. I need some time to digest this and really sit with it because I need it to be a full yes.
Yes.
And then that person feels honored and heard and said, okay, great.
And it's really funny that we're talking about this specifically right now because we're talking about that train pushing us forward, right? Until, you know, you're anxious, you're overwhelmed, or I'm overwhelmed. Speak for myself, you know, and all these things are pushing. So going back to that is what I've noticed is, for all of you watching, I just want you to know that I always teach on things that I've worked on or I'm working on. And so over the last little bit, I've been really questioning myself as like, how do I manage my own anxiety? You know, the everyday ways of like, hey, exercise and do these things and go for a walk and take deep breaths and, you know, singing and dancing and showering. And there's also some other things there. And what I've noticed is that my PEA brain is full on alive and firing at like full capacity without me managing it, right? So if I'm not managing it, then it's just like running its own thing. It's like, you know, projections, expectations, assumptions all over the board. And I'm living in a story. So we've also talked about stories on this show multiple times before. So I'll just give you what definition of story. Story is the filter you run that you have created either as a child or somewhere in your life that filters your perspective. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What do you call it, Dawn? You have a name for it.
Perception.
Yeah.
It's your sense of perception, but really it can be like you're wearing a pair of glasses and it's a lens of perception.
Yes, a lens of perception. So what I really wanted to get to, because I don't know about, I mean, I know you, Dawn, but everybody who's watching, like God or the universe or the higher-ness speaks to me in really interesting ways. So sometimes it'll come to me, like I call it spiritual radio, that sometimes it'll come to me in a song and I'll be like, oh yeah, thanks for the reminder. Or I'll open to a page in a book that it's just like, oh, that's the thing that I've been kind of like thinking about. You know, it's the way the brain works. So yesterday,
synchronicities for you to find the breadcrumb trail.
Exactly. So yesterday for a project, I'm researching the neuroscience of prayer and body touch and movement and breath. And I'm like, okay, so I'm filtering through all this information, kind of letting it sit in my brain. And right before I go to bed last night, I opened this book that I really love that really gives me a lot of insight and introspection moments. And it opens up to projection and core beliefs. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really need to check this because this is what's running in the background. So, right? And I know that we've talked about this so many times. The lenses of perception in which we step into. And we just had this conversation. I had a meltdown over literally nothing because I perceived something was a threat. And to be really honest, there's a lot of things that I picked up in my childhood and in my life that creates a lot of hypervigilance, right? And I think that many of us have. I know Dawn has, we've talked about hers. I know a lot of people that I know have, and especially people who have traumas or had scary, crazy, dangerous childhoods. have a lot of lenses of perception that create hypervigilance, anxiety, tension, fear. And I really wanted to give people an opportunity to really step into this place today. I know this is a really big topic. And I know that you guys who watch consistently know that we're not afraid to step into these places. So fair warning now. I just want to get centered again. So just to speak a little bit more to this place is that, again, you know, there's a lot of places, I'm just going to own it for myself, that I picked up some things in my childhood. So I picked up my mother's belief systems. I picked up my father's belief systems. The way that they interacted with me absolutely points to the way that I interact with others, or assume that they'll either show up for me or they won't. Mm-hmm. So the dynamic of my parental relationship absolutely impacts the way that I relate to my friends, my lovers, my boss, mm-hmm. which would be myself right now, but the people who I'm, you know, my colleagues or you know, the people at the grocery store, like those, it absolutely interacts. Like I interact in a very specific way based on those things, which, you know, and I think that when we start to get into what that really looks like in our lives, then we start to be able to be in choice and to make those self-honoring choices, right? Is that when we start to really see the projection, see the patterning, see the core belief that is pushing us forward, or how we filter reality, like that right there is where we get to be at choice. So I can own that I run a lot of anxiety and I run a lot of fear. I've been running it for 30 something years. So it's a consistent practice in my life. It is the practice of me being human. So I get to look at that. Right? Mm-hmm. For all our viewers, are you following along? Is this resonating with you? Do you have anything that you want to share before I ramble on some more?
Oh, I'm just saying, you know, being present with you and really leaning into like the experience of anxiety, you know, and how that can be so, you know, deeply overwhelming for people, you know, experiencing anxiety, where it takes you completely out of your presence and completely into like overwhelm drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I know using the breath is like a huge tool for managing anything that's coming forward. It really aligns us back into, all it takes is one aligned breath, like literally one aligned breath to bring back the breath into your body and realize, wow, I'm so much more than my mind. I'm so much more than my emotions. I'm not this body. I'm not these emotions. I'm not anything that I'm feeling. I'm so much more than that. And it gets you back into that expanded, like present state, right? Accessing our presence. I think that's key, you know, and it's retraining your brain not to believe in the stories that the mind wants to create, or the assumptions or the judgments, because the imprints we've been imprinted with as children, you know, even before we were ever pre-verbal, really set up our dynamic of how we chose to live into our life experience. And sometimes we've been living through a like Trish said, lens, right? A lens of anxiety. So maybe it was so uncomfortable for Trish in her childhood. There was so much fighting and chaos around that she chose to adopt the belief structure of like, I meet life through anxiety. Right? Like that's the go-to, or maybe your parents modeled that to you. Someone modeled it to you, and you're still learning how to rewire your brain not to have that go-to of immediately stepping into anxiety, to meet everything through the lens of anxiety instead of presence, right? And you're getting better and better and better. Like the more we talk about it, the more work we do, the more you peel the onion and let go of the belief structures that you discover, you have little aha moments with it. And I think that you're arriving at a deeper and deeper and deeper breakthrough. And this is the thing about spiritual curriculum is it sometimes takes a long time to dissolve our way of relating with ourselves around things. Like it took me years to dissolve the way of relating to myself where I was denying my own light, my own truth, my own owning my voice, my own owning my story around what happened to me. I was ashamed. And I had so much shame and repressed anger and repressed sadness and sorrow because of what I experienced, the rage I felt from my childhood and the confusion, the sheer confusion of why was I born into a reality that I experienced so much suffering and terror, and then the next person next door has like the most delicious unicorns and rainbows going on, like total peace, love, and hippies over there, and like my reality was completely different. Like what I was so utterly confused by that for most of my life. And it took me a very deep, long time to understand that the lens of, I always took it as rejection, right? Like I was rejected. My love wasn't enough. I was completely rejected. My light was rejected. I was super excited as a child and like happy to just be present and here and had so much love to give. And I got shut down constantly shut down. Like the moment I piped up to share anything, it was like shut down. And so I took that to mean that I just wasn't welcomed here. And I took that to heart, like deeply, you know, and by the time this is crazy. By the time I was 5 years old, I decided I would not greet my dad at the door any longer and that he did not love me and I had no more love to give him. At 5, I made a conscious choice. Like, that's intense. That's very intense that a 5-year-old would make that choice. Like that's so think of all the things I was conditioned and imprinted with before 5 years old. And it took me till 45 years old to digest it all and not completely hide from it and own it. So just to talk about spiritual curriculum and how it shows up, like that level of terror. And this is why Trish and I have been able to align in our work, is because we had, even though very different dynamics, right? Like she's been healing the mother line, the mother wound, and I've been healing the father line, the father wound more in my reality. But together we partner and make a whole reality for a beautiful container for people that are doing that work, right? And how to really digest it and understand it and dive into it and no longer fear it. And even if you're still showing up with a lens, because that's how you've met life, that's your protective mechanism, it's okay. Know and trust and lean in and know you have your hammer and you have your little chisel, and every day I'm going to continue to do my work on my spiritual curriculum till I know it's dissolved, because spirit has my back, and no matter what, I'm showing up with 100% of myself to complete this in this lifetime, right here, right now. I'm not avoiding it. I'm not running from it. I'm not sweeping it under the rug anymore. In fact, I'm going to pull the entire rug up and shake it out and be present with it all.
Yes.
However long it takes me.
Dawn, thank you for sharing that, because it brings up so many good points. For those of you who are watching and who are watching the replay, or who are listening right now on the podcast, is if you can think back, what childhood thoughts did you run? Dawn had a thought at 5 years old that her father didn't love her and she wasn't going to greet him at the door anymore. That's huge. Do you know how that impacts her life for the rest of her life? Like that 5-year-old, again, when we're in 5 years old, we're in magical thinking. That's what it's called. Children think in these like really broad, vast ways that they just create things that, because they don't have a concept of reality. Their reality is being created by the experiences that they live in and what they're told and how they're trained to think. So, and just to, because we've had this feedback a couple times, I want I want to define spiritual curriculum for anybody who's new watching.
Oh, thank you, Trish.
Spiritual curriculum is the work that we come to this planet to work through. So some people call this karma, some people call it dharma. It is the individual's work, spiritual work, emotional work, soul work that we're here to
Experience and do.
fall in love with, to work through, to work on, to work in, to integrate, however you want to call it. What I notice is that for me, when I was young, in my life now, I seek out experiences that are reliable. I seek out reliability. I seek out consistency. And I think that some of my hypervigilance or my anxiety comes from feeling like I don't know what's coming next. Like, oh my gosh, what's coming next? How do I trust in the situation or trust in the person because it's inconsistent? Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why our relationship works so well is that Dawn shows up very consistently for me. Like the people who are closest to me, they show up very consistent, especially when I'm not consistent. Like my emotions can be all over the board. Maybe they're not. They feel all over the board to me, but maybe I am being consistent with you. Like, oh, but she shows up consistently. So as someone, a pillar of my life, she shows up in the same way. Like, okay, I'm going to be consistent, reliable in this particular way. I'm going to keep showing up in this way. And so I seek out relationships, partnerships. Go ahead.
You've created that. It's a value of yours.
Yes.
You didn't have consistency in your childhood, and you chose that consistency is everything for you. So you personally weed your garden of all the people that aren't consistent and brought. I know you can hear me, but it's frozen. And brought forward the ones in your life that are consistent. You're like, I'm making them a pillar in my life.
Yes.
And that's consciousness. That's you choosing it and creating it.
Well, and just to see how I created that. So the lens of perception here was created by not feeling like I had a reliable or consistent. I mean, it doesn't matter if my childhood was like that or not, but that was my perception when I was young. I just want to make that distinction, okay? Because I'm not putting this all on my parents or the way that I grew up or the school or the system. I'm not putting it there. My brain created that. I was like, oh, this is inconsistent. I don't know how to behave. Like, so I created anxiety, hypervigilance. Okay. And we've talked about this so many times. Like, this is the layer of my codependent patterning where I have been in the past, really, I've been a fawner. So because it could be scary and dangerous or inconsistent, my parents were divorced. So I had two sets of rules. There were a lot of dynamics that I had to play with that meant that I had to dance and manipulate to get my needs met, right? So I was fawning to get my needs met as a 5-7-year-old child. Does this all make sense? Like, do you see how this is unfolding right now? So how does that impact from 5 to 35? Wow. And that's what the work is on the planet. That's what we do in coaching and in therapy, is to really start to dissolve and really understand the patterning that we created as a child and look at how it impacted our relationship. So then we get to make different choices. And that's where we're coming back to the work is how do you unlock the light of intimacy, which is beautiful. We all want intimacy. We all want connection. We all want to feel connected. Like, that's the place of separation, even in infancy, is a place where that creates all the friction. The idea of separation is where it creates all the friction. And so we're constantly seeking to come back to connection, right? Even if you're a loner and you're like, F people, there's some things that you probably want in connection with, right? I mean, but crazy cat ladies, You're not so crazy. I have one. We're going to get more. So I got you. Um, there's connection there, right?
That's funny.
Yeah. So Dawn and I are like, this is what our work is together. Remembering that we're all connected, bringing it back in, reminding the brain that it's connected, it's whole, and that it's the lens of perception that could be from childhood that you can bring forward now to make different choices, self-honoring choices. And it takes bravery and courage to step into looking at your core beliefs. It takes a lot.
It does take it. Yes, I agree. And that lens of perception could even go even further than that, where it could be familial patterning, where it's actually imprints from other family members, and it's a deep familial pattern that you're carrying over, or a pattern of, for instance, my parents always fought about sex and money. That was the thing. They've always fought about it. And I never knew the sex piece because they kept that piece hidden from me. But there's always one child in the family dynamic, in the pecking order, that will always live out the family's secrets. And so that, you know, that really like led to like a crazy reality for me in my life. But I've been digesting deeply this whole piece around money and the fighting, because it showed up in a family pattern of like, you know, my dad's father experienced being left out of his you know, family will when his dad died, and the stepmom being really horrible and like swindling the money. And then it happened again in my dynamic when my dad died. So it's like, it's had me think so deeply about my own ingrained belief systems. And I was diving so deeply into it, you know, and those that watch the show have already watched many shows. And I had that show with Kelly on, and it was about, you know, not shouldering the whole thing anymore. And that was so healing and relieving for me. And it's like a deep letting go, just like, it's not mine to carry. I don't have to live that. It's not mine to carry. Just because they carried it and they were that way doesn't mean I have to live my life that way. And what are the beliefs that are creating it, right? And so I had this deep realization of like, oh shit, there it is there. My parents always fought about money. Like, we were in the same home as a child, but so I never connected, like, you know, the whole concept of losing a home never was there for me. And I didn't understand it. But then I got down to the core pieces of it. They were building a second home, and they thought about money constantly in front of me. And that scared me. I didn't want to have a relationship but ultimately there was differences, cultural differences in my own marriage, right? Like, culturally we're different. Like, I was raised in a more conservative, like, you know, even though I'm Native American, like, white household, and my husband is Hispanic, completely different culture in the way they choose to live. So it's a bridging of like, how do we relate, you know? And it's been fascinating. And I just sobbed the other day because I got down to a really core piece of like, there it is there. It's not about ever losing a home. It was, for me, it was about, oh, I'd been afraid of arguing about money. And like, I just deeply sobbed and forgave myself and was like, because I don't argue about money, but I had a fear in my family because of my childhood conditioning. And that came forward, and it was just like, I can soften and relax and know, because honestly, my husband and I don't even fight about it. It's just a conversation now. But in the past, many, many years ago, we did. And that created a lot of conflict, ultimately to the point where we ended up losing a home. Like, that happened to us in 2000, you know, Occupy movement. We lost our home. We lost a 5-acre property that we built and cultivated, and it was devastating. And I had a new baby at the time. It was horrible and hard and a deep recovery. Ultimately, it was a course correction from the universe. It led me right into the path of like, okay, finish my BA, go on to get a master's in, you know, spiritual psychology, and like do the work, right? And it was a complete course correction, and I'm deeply thankful it happened. But in the time, it was so challenging. So just to speak about life curriculum, right? There it is there. That's been my journey. But all the while, it was to deeply dig up all the family stuff for me around my family. So just wanted to own some vulnerable stuff today, and there it is there. So hope you got some value out of it.
Dawn, I would just like to remind you in that. A, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. And B, we have a mutual friend who in her healing circles shares, your healing is my healing. My healing is your healing. Our healing is all healing. And so, like, that's why we do the work, is that's why we share on this show. And that's because it's the way that we can express the work that we've done to help other people. Someone's out there, like maybe someone's out there who's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that Trish had, there was separation in her family, there was isolation, there was stuff with her dad that she didn't feel loved or wanted after 7. There was, a verbal fear and abuse in her childhood. Oh, and she was raped twice. Like, nobody knows that until we share it. And look at me now. I just graduated from an amazing program. I've been pushing forward. I've gotten out of, multiple abusive relationships, looked at my own abusive behavior, and I'm continuing to dissolve the patterns that I didn't even know that I had up until a few years ago when I started doing the work. And so when I can share those moments with our viewers and our listeners, like and when you show up, like that's the way that we can touch people. Like you can do it too.
Absolutely.
You who are listening can do it too. We've done it. Again, I just want to say that Dawn said that when she was 5, she made a decision when she was 5, and it took her 40 years to do it. And she's still committed to continuing to look at all facets of that particular curriculum. Like that's the thing. What else are you doing on the planet? Yeah. Fun, pleasure, crying, feeling all the feelings, Disneyland, the whole Disney experience. I got it. I'm there too.
And the beautiful thing is like letting go of that concept. I heard this piece from you. I'm going to bring forward, Trish, and you said just like that thing is always looming around the corner, or the fear of that thing looming around the corner. And we call this in USM the fear of, oh, the other shoe's going to drop. And it's like,
does anyone else relate or resonate with that?
Like the fear of the other shoe dropping. And it's like, it's a thing. It's a very deep cultural conditioning right there, feeling the fear of the other shoe dropping. And it's like always on edge, living on edge, because like just around the corner, like just as we expand into our greatness, then we have a little bit of a fear, thinking like, oh shit, something's coming around the corner. Sorry, I cursed.
On this show, Dawn.
I know, it's just funny because anyway, yeah. So I'm human.
As I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about my childhood in general, and gosh, there was a lot. I was premature. My father wasn't at the birth. He fell into a hole in the hospital and broke his kneecap.
Whoa.
While he was running to attend my birth. That's how I came into this world. My mom was pissed, just saying. Followed by 3 months later, my mom left my father because he wanted to go fishing all the time. So the story goes. And then from there, my mother moved, and I moved a lot. I can't remember how many schools I've been to. Like, I know that I was in, I don't know, 5 to 6 different homes with just my mom. And then every other weekend, I would go visit my father. So by the time that I started to even feel comfortable, it was picking up, packing my bag and going somewhere else, which also really resonates why I like to travel so much, because it kind of feels somewhat safe. But I do like to go home. Yeah, see ya. And so then there's like, my mom having her own stress of, weird relationships and relationship stuff that she had, and like how she trained me to do that whole thing. And so her stress comes out in being frustrated and not having enough money, living in Montana, as a bartender, a single mom. Like, I remember one Christmas that someone put a bunch of Christmas gifts, because my mom couldn't afford Christmas gifts, and labeled it Santa for me. right? And then, like, I know, I'm like, oh gosh. So then there's like all these little pieces. Like my dad lost his dad when he was 6, and he never really showed up in the loving, fatherly way that I've wanted him to. And I recently was like, hey, I love you, and I'm not going to try to fit you into the box that I want you in anymore. You can just show up the way you want to. That was a really powerful moment, but it took me 34 years to get there, right? And so all of these things kind of now are pointing to my core beliefs. And it really has taken me a long time and a lot of therapy and a lot of coaching. Like I have had massively powerful coaches in my life. You being one of them, Dawn, Felipe, Scott Katamas, some of my Gestalt coaches. Like I've had a lot of support to really help me to find this next piece that we're going to go into, really accessing my core beliefs. Like, and there's a really easy way to access, wants and desires. We're going to take you through it, and to see how that right there really motivates our movements, motivates how we move in the world, how we see the world, what our projections are. And then from there to really look at those places, how to really not shame yourself, but to really like hold yourself in those places, because that's so very human. How does Scott say it? How perfectly human to just have these experiences and have all these feelings based on interpretations of reality through our own perspective. I know that was kind of a heavy sentence. I'll try to say it again as in a different way. That how we interpret reality is through the filters in our perspective and our perception, right? And so how do we look at it, go, oh, this is my patterning, to be like, that's kind of cute. Look at my patterning. Cute, huh? And love it. And become empowered to make different choices to actually love in reality and how to move forward in that. You want that? Say yes.
Yes.
Wait, it's right there. I think it's right there. For me, it's right there. No, it's actually right. Shoot. There. Right there for me. So put it in the comment box if that's what you want, because that's where we're going right now.
Great.
Oh, so much sweetheart stuff, Dawn. It's been a long time since we've had a show by just together. And
I know, it's great.
Spontaneous and in alignment.
Yes.
Usually. Always.
Yes, absolutely. Well, why don't I take us through the self-empathy tool really quickly? Or really centered, I should say.
Centeredly. And again, I want to just, before we start this, just share the importance of the self-empathy tool. So not only does it give you an opportunity to create empowered requests and to know yourself more deeply, but the reason why this tool is really important for specifically today's show is that when you get down, when you take the filter off of your own brain, you're like, okay, I'm going to put that down. And when you drop into your heart, and when you're down into your stomach and into your values and beliefs, that's where you can really see what you're running, what patterning you're running, because those values and beliefs and wants and desires are really where the juice is. That's what you live and are driven by, right there. Andrea, it's all yours.
Gorgeous. Thank you for saying that. All right, so I just invite everybody to take a heart-centered deep breath right here. And all it takes is one breath to come into complete alignment and centeredness. You don't have to work very hard to call spirit in and be present. You just have to allow it. So allow yourself to take a deep breath and call in and invoke your inner counselor to come forward inside. This leads your authentic self forward. It's your highest self, your higher self, your I am presence. And acknowledge what thoughts have come forward for you in the last 15 seconds. Just find one sentence that might be crossing across your mind. Just one thought or sentence. And I invite you to, pay attention to it, but then drop down and state your feelings around that sentence that's coming forward. What were you thinking about? What do you feel about it? Just take a breath there. Lean into it, acknowledge it. And I invite you to go even deeper underneath it, underneath the sentence, underneath your feelings. What's there? What's present for you? What do you feel? What needs to be honored? What isn't being met by you? Is it a feeling of, deeper intimacy and compassion that's longing to come forward? Is it a fear? Is it a higher truth? Like, what's there for you? Be honest with yourself. Like, allow yourself to feel all your feelings around what that thought was creating. And can anyone in your life meet your needs there that are asking to be met, what the need is? Or how can you self-source, self-soothe, self-honor what is coming forward, and can you meet that need? Is it a need for more joy, a need for more self-care, a need to be heard, a need to be expressed, a need to be a part of yourself be more owned and claimed? Like, what is there for you? Like, feel it. Allow yourself to give yourself permission to really feel what is there and present for you. And this is it. This is how you self-resource. This is how you get to the underneath of that spinning thought that can be taking you out of alignment, and just really drop down and what is really truly asking to emerge. It's huge. It's a great way to relate to ourselves and learn to have self-empathy for whatever is coming forward in our consciousness, because it all matters. All your feelings matter. All your higher truths matter. All your unconditional love residing in you matters. And it's a place to meet it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Now, if you will, oblige me, type in what you got to. What are your wants and desires? Pulling it one step backward. And what were your wants and desires? What were the values that were running right there? Because that's a really good place to access what your core beliefs are. And to really be courageous here. One of my core values that literally runs my life is to be connected. For me, being connected meant that I got my basic needs met, like housing, food, things that I needed. Being disconnected meant that I didn't have those things. Does that make sense? Yeah. That I was safe. Being connected meant that I was physically and emotionally safe. So the desire for more self-empowerment, more self-acceptance, to be trusted. Like, how perfectly and beautifully human there, right? Now I invite you to be really brave, to be courageous here, to step in to the question of where did your parents share these values with you, these desires? Like, as a child, drop back in and ask yourself, did I have the want to be empowered or self-accepting? Were they hard on you? Did they not trust you, or did you not trust them? How did that differ? How did they differ there? So the places where so when we start looking at that right there, or maybe it was a neighbor or someone, a friend, or someone an idol that you had, or someone, a mentor or a teacher that you really wanted their attention, or maybe it was your culture You know, I grew up in Montana. Their culture is a whole other thing versus California culture. Or maybe you grew up Mormon, or maybe you grew up, you know, like I had many friends who were religious. Like, there's filters there. And I just invite you to look at that. I know that this can be hard, and I'm not suggesting that you pick the hottest and the scariest version of this, because this, you know, you can reach out if this is a triggering conversation. And I invite you to reach out to either Dawn or I, both together, or your coach, your mentor, your therapist, if this is triggering for you. And to really think about, just to come back though, just to think about what was here for you. What filter are you running? Because this is a really great place to access your projection, your expectations, and your assumptions about the world. This is the filter in which you step into. Again, I run a lot of anxiety because I feel unsafe a lot. I'm hypervigilant because I'm seeking reliability. See? But to only notice that is like through my understanding my values, understanding my wants and needs. They're literally driving us all the time. So, just to read a comment while we're here. My dad empowered me subtly. Mom's energy was stronger and always correcting me. And resulting filter, not good enough. And you know, Jody Ann, like, I feel you there. Like, I'm feeling you there. Yes. The overcorrection means like, oh my God, am I not good enough to be loved just who I am? I get that. Like, I have that too. And I think that many people who are watching and listening probably have that. And if you do, like, we're all brothers and sisters in this planet together.
I find in my coaching experience, it's very, very, it comes forward a lot, and many people, I mean, almost every person I've coached, honestly, has had some level of this, like, I'm not enough piece, actually. And I've woven this into a program I'm creating, actually, because it's so big. I noticed like how crucial this part is, right? And I had it. I always believed I wasn't enough because of what I experienced. I was always told I wasn't enough, basically. And so this is huge, like letting go of believing that our outer reality is reflecting that to us, you know. And when we let go of relating to ourselves in that way, where we believe we're not enough, then the outer reality stops mirroring that to us, that we stop feeling it from others. Because it's really ourself seeing ourself through that lens.
And do you understand how that's a projection? Like, are you seeing it, how it's unfolding now? How we're peeling back that layer? A way to check your perception or your projection in that sense is really to examine the conversations that you have with other people in your mind. You get it? So when I'm having a conversation with someone, or when I'm running a story, or when I'm running a situation in my head, that's actually through my perception, regardless of whether it's actual reality and involves the other person or not. It's literally a world in my head. That's projection. That's an expectation and an assumption. I'm literally creating the whole world that way. So when I so this is, again, it's like a script that you're writing in your head in the reality of your very limited imagination. Each of us has a pretty limited perspective based on what we do have capacity to know. Like, we can continue to learn and grow our imagination. And we were taught a very specific language based on parental and social construct there. You know, whatever your lexicon or your language patterning is, you that's the way you think. So that's one way to check your projection. It's like, oh, did I have an expectation in my brain because I created a story about how Dawn would show up? Oh, here's an example. I'm going to give you an exact example. I had this thing made for us that I was so excited about, and I had created a story based in my head that she was going to like it. Well, she didn't. And I got really butthurt about it because I had already created the reality in my head, right? I didn't ever ask her, hey, Dawn, so I'm thinking about doing this thing. It was totally a surprise for her. But I had created a whole reality that Dawn did this. And then I interpreted it in some way that hurt my own feelings. Projection. Get it? Right. And so this is what taking responsibility looks like. This is what being courageous and defiltering your perspective. So as I can own that, like, hey, Dawn, I had this whole story that you'd be like freaking thrilled. It's a place of vulnerability for me, which also offers a place of connection with her, right? Like, hey, this is like to let her in on my story and how it's created is one of the most vulnerable and intimate places.
I acknowledge you for bringing that forward. And it also is linked to that place of like, when I do good work, when I do good things, it was also creating a place of where you deeply long to show up in your full presence and give in a way that's like, I created this as an offering.
It was very young for me. It was a very young place. And I was like, oh my God, look, surprise. And you were like, whoa. I was like, oh. So, I mean, but that's also, again, just to own that was a story that I created. I had no idea. Instead of like, hey, yo, how do you feel about this? with coming with no expectation, right? So when we show up to people in our lives with expectations and with assumptions, like I assumed how she was going to behave. It's not fair. It's not fair to her. It's not fair in me loving her. That's totally a projection of my own inner thought, right? And I gave a lot of power to that, not the creation of it, but gave a lot of power to the dopamine rush that I wanted to get, which is super selfish behavior, right? I wanted the dopamine rush of giving you a gift. I mean, I could probably do this a different way if I wanted to. I know that there's things that I know consistently that there's things that you can do or I can do for you that would give you like oh yeah. See? So I think that really owning your projection there is like, you get to ask rather than assume. And it's really, where are my values? What story am I running based on my past experiences, my fears? Am I really scared right now in this moment? Is something going to eat me? Or am I going to be hurt or emotionally hurt? No. I'm hypervigilant because of a brain pattern that I run since I was a child. Okay. Can I be compassionate to myself? Yes. Can I do the beautiful self-talk or the self-care that I need? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to dance? Do I need to sing? And then can I show up and own my projection with the other person? Because if you want to love in reality, if I want to love Dawn or love my lovers or my mom or my dad in reality, it means that I'm owning my projections. I'm letting them in on them. And I'm asking about their reality so that we can both merge what's alive and real for us rather than stepping forward in my PEA Brain, from my PEA Brain, right? So then the next place I wanted to bring up something that also has come up is humility. And again, this place of vulnerability, this place of humility. And I want to make a distinction here about humility. And I read this in one of my books recently that I really loved. So I'm just going to read it. Humility is commonly confused with self-depreciation and servility, but referring to its derivation of the Latin humus, that it's meaning earth, and reminds us to be humble is to be grounded. And I thought that was a really interesting distinction about humility. So for me to actually own that I had a story, that I have these running filters in which I live by, to really out myself. Like, I'm scared right now and I have no reason to be, but I'm scared. I've been running this filter. And to really say, hey, I want connection. I want connection. I'm scared. I don't know how to get there. And I've been running this story. It's most certain that Dawn, if she's with me and present and also wants connection, that she'll take a deep breath and be like, wow, I want that too. I see your story. It sucks to live in your story. Thanks for letting me out of the box. It's powerful work. So this is the one piece that I wanted to share. So instead of saying, I think that this is a thought that came to me today. The thought that came to me about being afraid, or the thought that you would be super excited about this, came to me today. And what I really want is to show up in showing you that I'm as committed and as excited about our business together and about our relationship and our friendship. That's what I want. And I invite you all to hear the distinction between my projection that I ran on her and how I just showed up. That's loving in reality. That's being wildly courageous and vulnerable, honoring both of us in my humility, building more trust just by sharing authentically, being courageous enough to share authentically. Who knows what might be the experience that she'll have a response to or a reaction. And it's even more courageous to hold you or hold the other person in their truth. And to be like, this is my vulnerable space, and I'm going to show up in a place of holding you in your vulnerable space, whatever that may look like.
And sometimes when you initiate like a deeper vulnerable conversation with someone or your loved one, it really opens the door for them to like connect to a deeper part of that, what's going on for them. And you just initiate like a very heart-centered, like aligned healing moment sometimes. And it's beautiful. Like this is it, right? Like practicing that like authenticity and leaning in to where you in the past wouldn't have told the full truth, and this time practicing like full disclosure, full truth telling, full ability, lean in and be like, wow, I can explore this. And it's gorgeous to think of it in the sense of, I'm a spiritual scientist. What if I run an experiment in my life that I in the past was distrusting, in the past I was withholding, in the past I was afraid to tell the truth because I always got punished for doing so as a child. What if you actually just adopted a spiritual scientist outlook in your life and chose to lean in and tell the full truth about how you feel? Like, wow, I'm really scared to tell you this. I have to tell you something that's really vulnerable. Like, that's how you open the conversation. I have to tell you something really vulnerable. Can we have a talk right now? And if they're busy, it's not going to be the right time. They'll tell you. I mean, okay, can we meet in an hour and talk? Great. And then lean in and say, wow, I was really scared to tell this to you, but I've been afraid here, or I've been misunderstood here, or whatever it is that is on your heart, right? That you've been kind of scared to share. The other person is going to be like, oh my gosh, I've been feeling that same feeling right there with you. Most of the time, that person is afraid to share the same thing, because that's matching spiritual curriculum. You're both working a pattern that's identical, and you feel it in the other person and you feel it in yourself, and it feels icky and you don't know how to share it, but they're feeling it too. It's just a little bit of a different lens for them and their life, but it's the same pattern. So I just invite you to run an experiment. I've adopted this wildly in my life. Gosh, what if I just ran an experiment of like, differently now? I'm going to show up differently. I'm going to tell the full truth when I was really scared to. Like, I did it with my husband. Just like my husband went on a vacation, and well, he went on a work vacation. Let's just reframe that. So he didn't go on vacation without his wife and child. He went on a work trip, and he worked the whole time, but it happened to be in Mexico. But it brought forward this like sadness that I felt, because in the past, I always operated out of being I was so wounded from my childhood that I operated in this place inside of myself where I was the man and the woman, which didn't make much space for my husband to be the man, right? And I actually firmly, for a long time in my life, which is deep, I've done a lot of work on this and I can own it, but I really showed up in fear around allowing my husband to be the man. So I would overwork. I would choose to be over responsible and just dismiss him as not capable. I would dismiss him as not capable of being my king fully. And so I would just, before he would even have an opportunity, I would cultivate it. I would make it happen. I would make the plans. I would do it all. I would create the whole thing and then be resentful inside that he didn't show up for me in that way. And so I created all these vacations in our whole marriage. I paid for all the vacations. And the beautiful, gorgeous opportunity now is I get to lean back and allow him to do that for me now. And I don't have to feel resentment. And this is where the practicing of vulnerability, this piece came forward when he traveled. I met that sadness of like, oh, I want to go on vacation. And I had this belief come forward of feeling left. And I was like, that is so funny that I feel that way because he's not leaving me. What is that? And then I leaned in and bam, my brother came forward. And I was like, oh my God, I hadn't met the sorrow and sadness of the time my brother left home when I was 7 and he was 17. And I truly felt left then. I felt abandoned and left because I was left home with my abuser and I got abused horribly at that time in my life, like beaten. I got beaten. Like truly, I was left by my mother, and my mother was working. She was pursuing something that meant everything to her, and I don't shame her or wrong her for it, nor my brother. They were living their life and choosing to do what was right for them. And I got left at home by my abuser. And it's okay that that happened because it was meant to unfold that way. And I forgive my dad. He was terrified and angry and never owned his feelings. And that's powerful to say this live on TV that I forgive him for that. And you know what? I met that sorrow when my husband went away and I was like, I love you, Carol. I love you, Carol. And I just forgave that part that wanted to believe he abandoned me and forgave that little one that believed that inside of myself. And I was able to communicate in text thread while my husband was away. I just want to own my vulnerability. I opened the conversation that way. I said, vulnerable text thread. I want to own a part that's really scared for me to say this. And I was really scared to say, I've been believing all this time that you're not capable of making the extra money to take us on vacation. And I'm sorry I've been doing that in my mind towards you. Big. So I love you, honey. If you're watching this show, I love you. And I forgive myself for showing up in our marriage that way all this time. And I'm so deliciously excited for you to spoil us on an amazing vacation when the time is right.
Dawn, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
And that's the honest truth, like doing deeper work. And it's always unfolding, right? We're always meeting our past, our parts, all of ourself. And it's great. And the more we do this, the more we get excited to do it. And the better, then our outer life starts to match our inner life, and it stops to feel like, how is that deep contrast, where how do I make that deep contrast of like, my inner life feels this way, my outer life doesn't match. And the more we do this work, it unravels all that stuff. And then the most gorgeous life starts to present itself, where we're like, we're lining up our soul line goals with our goal line goals, which is like,
Yes.
goal line is like ego goals, like get the job and the white picket fence and the car and the whatever, right? That's goal line goals. But soul line goals are really what your soul chose to come here and do, right? Like, you lean into your gifts and embody them fully. And that's where it starts to, like, that gap starts to close and beautiful, gorgeous things come forward. That's God magic in your life, because you don't have those barriers inside anymore. Barriers to receiving your brilliance, your blessings, your destined life, soul journey you're meant to live.
Mm-hmm. Dawn, the story that you just shared was all of the pieces of this show. And I just want to bring it back for everyone, is like, if you want to understand how to understand your projection, like, that's the place. You just heard Dawn walk through it in her own life with you in front of you, is that she acknowledged her projection onto someone and created even deeper connection while living, like, weaving reality, like loving in reality with her husband, because she was running a store.
And this was the most amazing thing, is I was met by him without fear, without anger. We didn't have an argument about it. He heard me, he acknowledged me, and he said, wow, I realized all this time that I had been feeling like vacations were a liability. And he came forward with his truth around why he never initiated it. And I was like, oh my God, wow, vacations are freaking self-care and like an investment in yourself. And we were able to align in our marriage in that place of like, that we both desire creating like that deep intimacy and connection with our family in a gorgeous vacation when the time everything lines up. And so it just was realigning this beautiful place in us where we both desire that. And I was heard and met, and he was heard and met. And then we came home and had an amazing conversation, and even an amazing lovemaking session around it afterwards, to just really, like, it just took it even further into like deeper intimacy, and in a place where there was disconnect became a bond.
Dawn, I just want to say that the piece about humility there is that I really want to acknowledge you for, is that when you recognized what you were doing, you chose to acknowledge and own it. You were like, oh, that's me. I'm that. I did that. I'm doing that. Instead of shutting it down and pushing it aside, because I think that we're often taught that we can't have experiences that mean that we're not like perfect. Like, oh, I'm a good person. I believe that I'm a good person, so I would never do that. Well, that's the difference between living in a projection and living in humility. It's like, oh, I actually have capabilities to do literally anything in the world. I have all the human emotions. I can be the most loving person and be the most murderous. Like, it's potential. There's potential there. And when you own what is real and alive for you, look at how it shows up in your relationship. And this, I mean, everybody who's watching and listening, this is it. This is how you connect, through saying things like, oh, that's me. I can own that. And I can be vulnerable there. I can be honest. I can be raw. And you didn't know how he was going to react. And look at how he reacted. Because you owned your ownness in this. You owned your experience in it. You didn't say, oh, you aren't showing up in this way. You said, oh my gosh, I realize this And this is how I've been pushing you into my projection. And for all of you listening and watching, this is a really key point. If you want to develop really, really rich and loving relationships, is that owning your projections is really important here. So if I say to Dawn, you didn't do this, she's automatically going to get defensive. But when I say, hey, I have this thing that I'm recognizing, or I want to own my frustration around this, and what I want or what I'm needing right now is this, and I'm putting that on you. That's significantly more powerful than pointing fingers. And that's when they say the point finger piece, where you have one finger pointing out and three fingers pointing back. That's exactly what that means. Is that you're not taking ownership of your own projections there. So when I can just be like, when I'm more like this, here's my heart, Dawn. She's got an opportunity. And when you present it, vulnerable text thread, I'm scared to tell you this. And I think that I want to, and this is what I'm realizing and how I pushed you into the box of my own projection or my own story. How many times have I done that? Shoot, I've done that so many times. Like I can recognize those places in other relationships. Shit, in my own relationship now, with my mom even. Like my dad, I just shared the story about my dad. And when I was like, hey, you show up in the way that you want to show up for me in the relationship that you want. And I will just meet you there. Or this business thing that I've been working on, that I had this experience that you talked me through, that I was like freaking freaked out. That again, my hypervigilance and something random and inconsistent and unreliable showed up in my life, threw me totally off. And I felt unstable in it. Like, oh my God, am I hurting someone? Is it what kind of situation, what kind of dynamic am I getting myself into? And I really had to sit with that place right there of like, wow, I showed up in my fear of being another woman and my shame in that, because I've had many people have other relationships. My dad had another relationship that I felt really abandoned in. Like I had to really own that in a different way, because that's how it was showing up in my work situation, not just a lover situation, right? So I got to sit in that. And when I shared this with the woman, I know this sounds so interesting. Like I shared this experience with my potential colleague. She was like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. It makes sense. I'm sorry that was triggering for you. It wasn't that big of a deal for me. And then she got to share what was upsetting for her, and she didn't want to be excluded. Again, coming back to connection, coming back into that place of vulnerability and owning my projections on her.
Gorgeous.
It was powerful. It was really, really powerful. And it was really sweet, because then I felt heard. She felt heard. We both got even more sisterly, right? And it was a really good place to step into even more like juice and creativity. Like my imagination was only so vast in that space. And then when I was able to be honest and be like, that's me. That was me in this, like, that's all my energy there. Here, I want to show it to you. I'm not going to make you're not owning it. You don't have to take ownership. That's just me. I'm going to take ownership. I'm just going to share this with you. And it was so well received. And again, when you show up in people's lives and you don't point at them and say that it's their fault, that your perception, that you're hurting, because who's feeling the feelings?
You are.
So that's the thing. So whoever's feeling the feelings is having the interaction in their own body and in their brain and in their psyche and in their past and in their psychology. So, wow, this was a really deep show for all of you who are still and listening. And I invite you to take some deep self-care today. Like if you were following along and this brought up anything, please reach out to either of us. or someone that you feel really connected to. Yeah.
Also, I just want to bring forward, if you're really ready to dive into healing, like the parts that we just brought forward in this show, come on over to our Facebook group, Elevate Your Trust for Women, and jump in and like be there with us. We would love to have you attend. It's a free group. I created a gorgeous self-care PDF for women. It's like the Queen's Care self-care PDF you can grab. And there's also a gorgeous Queen's Code invocation awaiting you to listen to over and over. It's a healing invocation. So come on over and grab it. We would love to have you in the group. So just look for Elevate Your Trust for Women in the Facebook. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Grab the link, come on over, join us, jump in the group. We would love to have you. And in the near future, we're just going to be in there a lot, doing a lot of lives. So just wanted to kind of plant that seed. It's coming. But the group is live and happening.
And I would also like to, on a slightly lighter note, that for anybody who's single out in the world and is looking for, building community, and also interested in some events. I run a group called Secure, Sovereign, and Single, and we are hosting singles speed relating events where we can build community and potentially get some dates. We've had some connections already, and we've had some friend connections, we've had some lover connections, and it's a really fun, beautiful way to be vulnerable and intimate and to share and to practice our dating and relationship skills. And I'll put it in right here because we have an event coming up. It's going to be really fun and really beautiful. So I love you all. Thank you so much. See you next week. We have a really powerful guest next week, Sonia Sophia. So see you soon.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.